Mr. Guy Kawasaki, you call yourself the chief evangelist of Canva. You must be on a mission here. What is your mission?
My mission for Canva is to establish it as the standard in the world for people to make anything involving graphics. So what Canva is, it's an online graphic design service. It's based in Sydney, Australia. And what we do is we enable basically everybody to create beautiful graphics in minutes. And it's fast and it's free and it's very powerful. We create between 6 and 7 million graphics per day for people around the world.
This is more than the population of Switzerland, Guy. Now, here on Hey China, we're big fans of Canva as well. We use it for our thumbnails, for our investor prospectus, for flyers, for everything. Do you guys have a favorite design yourself?
Well, I use it for, well, if you looked at the cover of my podcast, I mean, there's so many uses for you. One of the key strengths of Canva is that the assumption is when you come to Canva, you have an idea of what you need. And it could be something as simple as an Instagram post, a cover photo, an album photo, a book cover, a 16:9 presentation, a flyer, a business card. And so there are a finite number of things that are usually a design type, right? So Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, Etsy store, eBay store, they're all a limited number of design types. And then within each design type, we have hundreds of examples built. So what people do is they find the design type, they look through hundreds of examples, they pick an example, they change the text, they change the photo using their photo or our photo. And I swear, within 5 minutes, you can create a beautiful graphic.
True, absolutely.
At Hey China here, we are a Canva Pro customer, I should say.
Yeah, yeah.
You are a Silicon Valley guy. Guys from the Silicon Valley. Started with Apple, with Jobs, and throughout the whole bit. I guess the question is, what does Sydney attract you about? Why is the company headquartered in Sydney, Australia?
The company is headquartered in Sydney, Australia, because the founders started it in Perth. So they were in Western Australia, and then for some reason they moved to Sydney. I honestly don't know the reason why they moved to Sydney, but they started the company in Sydney, and I've been with them for 6 years, and they reached out to me because they saw that my tweets had graphics built with Canva. And so they reached out to me, and the rest is history. So I wasn't looking for a job or anything. And I call this Guy's Golden Touch. And so Guy's Golden Touch is not that whatever I touch turns to gold. Guy's Golden Touch is whatever is gold Guy touches. And so I figured out, and with the help of my assistant,
Evangelist.
Yeah. So with the help of my assistant, Peg Fitzpatrick, I mean, she said, yeah, this is a really great service. And that's why I was attracted to it.
What do you think is the future of creative design? Is it more animations, motion graphics? What do you think, Guy?
It's, you know, it's all of the above. I mean, who knows? So right now it's, you know, a lot of pictures, it's GIFs, or GIFs, depending on how you want to say it. It's presentations, it's video. I mean, everything. It's hard to imagine a world that isn't really dependent on the production of graphics anymore.
You quit Apple twice. You worked next to Steve Jobs. What a legend. What do you think of him?
What do I think of him? Well, basically every story, every magazine article, every movie, everything you've ever heard about him is probably true. He had a unique way of dealing with people, He was demanding. He wasn't subtle. it was a challenge. It was almost scary working for him. But, people tend to focus on the negative side of that. The positive side of that is that I think I did my best work of my career because of that fear of him. And he drove us to accomplish things probably we could not have accomplished without his leadership. And so I consider it an honor, though not necessarily a pleasure, to have worked for him.
You've done 1,000 jobs and you're still such a busy man. You're an ambassador for Mercedes-Benz. You wrote some 15 books. Now you're busy with Guy Kawasaki, the Remarkable People podcast as well. You have a wonderful studio there in the background. You've interviewed Apple co-founder Steve Wozniak, Martha Stewart, Jane Goodall, and so on. What fascinates you about podcasts?
What fascinates me about podcasting, in particular, vis-a-vis writing books. When you write a book, it takes about a year to write a book. When all is said and done, it probably takes another year to actually get it published. So it's a 2-year process. And you know that the day the book is out, that you want to make changes in it, but you cannot make changes. It's done. And you probably never will. You may fix typos and stuff, but you're never going to change it substantially. You get one advance. Hopefully you earn back the advance and more. But that's that one shot. And so it's such an inflexible medium. Now, podcasting, I ship a podcast 52 times a year, and I can react very quickly. So, for example, I interviewed during the primary election Andrew Yang. And I interviewed Andrew Yang and published his podcast a week later. Imagine if I had interviewed Andrew Yang in the primary, and 12 months from now, the book would come out. I mean, it would be almost useless. Whatever he said in 2020 is no longer relevant in 2021 or 22. And so that's why I think podcasting is much more flexible, much more timely a medium than book publishing.
And much more fun and interactive because you have somebody to talk to.
Well, yes, but don't get me wrong, okay? So if you think that podcasting is as simple as you turn on a recorder and that's it, and you turn off the recorder and you upload, it's not that simple at all. So I think that between my time, a sound designer's time, and a social media person, a marketing person's time, for each hour of podcast, there's probably 15 hours of work. So it's take 15 times 52, we're talking about 700, 800 hours per year. That's about what it takes to write a book.
You blog, your podcast, and Martina just said you wrote 15 books. Incredible, true feat there. But I think equally, when I was reading your amazing bio, Guy, I'm thinking, well, many people may say, well, how do you box this person in? How does Guy Kawasaki see Kawasaki as?
Wait, wow, what was the question again? How does what?
How do you see Guy Kawasaki?
Oh, I see Guy Kawasaki primarily as a father. And I'm a father. I have 4 children. And in order to be a father, I have to provide. And in order to provide, I have to do things. I have to write books. I have to make speeches. I have to, podcast. I have to sell sponsorships to the podcast. I have 2 children who have graduated, so they're out on their own. But I have 2 more still that I have to pay tuition for. So, yeah, I mean, some people may say that they see themselves as visionaries or revolutionaries or, leaders or executives or whatever. I see my role as a father.
That's wonderful. You wrote also one book that was called Wise Guy, about your life experience and so on. It was published in 2019. What are some of the experiences and encounters maybe that have shaped you?
Oh, yeah. So this story is one of the best stories in the book, and it will really serve 2 purposes. So first, I'll tell you the story. That's purpose number 1. So this was about 15 or 20 years ago. And at the time, I had a Porsche 911. And I stopped at a stoplight in Menlo Park, California. And I looked to my left, and there's this car with 4 teenage girls, okay? And they're looking at me, and they're laughing, and they're making eye contact. So the girl in the front seat motions to roll down my window. So I roll down my window, and I think, oh, she's going to ask me if I'm Guy Kawasaki, Apple employee, venture capitalist, founder of tech company, author, speaker, you know, all the good stuff. So she leans her head out, and she says to me, "Are you Jackie Chan?" And that was one of the funniest moments of my life. Now, there's a little lesson there, which is, ever since that day, one of my goals is that someday in Beijing, Jackie Chan is driving his S-Class or his Rolls Royce or his Ferrari or Lamborghini or whatever he's driving, and he pulls to a stop sign, and he looks out, and there's a car full of teenage girls, and the girls are giggling and smiling and making eye contact, and the girl asks him to roll down his window, and he rolls down his window, and the girl leans out and says, "Are you Guy Kawasaki?" That's one of my goals in life. Now, the second reason I'm telling you this story, okay, is if anybody is listening to this podcast and video and knows Jackie Chan, I would like to interview Jackie Chan for my podcast, but I don't know how to get to him. So if anybody knows him, my email is guykawasaki@gmail. Send me an email. You know, maybe Jackie Chan's personal assistant, maybe Jackie Chan is watching this. So, you know, I would like to interview for remarkable people.
We will try our best and support you with our network.
Thank you.
Shirley and I.
Let's go back to Canva's story here. You started to target the China market back in 2019. How is that going so far?
Oh, it's going very, very well. I mean, you know, I think that the desire to make great graphics basically transcends every culture. It's not like the Asian culture says, okay, we don't need pictures, and the Western culture says we do need pictures, or vice versa, right? And so everybody needs pictures, everybody needs graphics, everybody needs to communicate better. So it's been received extremely well, and also we've made the investment to really localize it for China with different kinds of pictures, different kinds of fonts, support for the language, all that kind of stuff. So it's not like it's just an American company throwing something over the transom and praying that enough people in China speak English and can use the product. We've really localized it for China.
Guy, coming into the Chinese tech universe, Chinese entrepreneurs and Chinese tech market, it's ruthless. Aren't you worried about intellectual property concerns? Maybe a smart entrepreneur somewhere on China's business scene take Canva's concept and build something even bigger.
Well, I mean, but the rational answer to that question is, should such a concern prevent you from addressing such a large market? So, it kind of is a test of your perspective in life that, are you trying to view the world as half full or half empty? Half empty would be, it might get copied. Half full means, well, I might get copied, but man, there are, hundreds of millions of potential users in China. So our perspective is, it's a very attractive market. We can provide a great service, and arguably that the kind of competition that can occur will keep us on our toes. So we it's our goal and our responsibility to always be one step ahead of the competitors. So welcome to the real world.
Healthy competition for sure.
On the podcast, Guy, you spent so much effort in building it up. You call it the remarkable people. How do you define remarkable?
Well, first of all, my podcast is called Remarkable People, which is different than rich people or famous people. So I don't really care about the rich or the famous, because I'm more concerned about the impact the person has had on society. And I'm more interested in the story than, how much are you worth. So if someone who is a private equity billionaire wants to be on Remarkable People, I mean, yeah, if Warren Buffett called me up and said, I want to be on Remarkable People, okay, right? Warren Buffett passes the test. But your random investment banker who's worth $1 billion, what do I care? And so, there are a lot of people, like you mentioned, Jane Goodall, Martha Stewart, Ariana Huffington, Christy Yamaguchi, they are truly remarkable and famous. But there are lots of people on my podcast who are not famous but remarkable. And one example is a woman who was, smuggled across the Mexican-U.S. border by coyotes. These are the smugglers. As a baby, she grew up in a small house with, 10 other people, and she got through school, and now she works for Adobe in a very successful tech marketing job. So not that many people have heard of her. Certainly she's not a billionaire, but that's a remarkable story, particularly in these times where immigration is such a hot issue in America. So that kind of person is in my podcast that you probably never would have heard of.
And there are millions and zillions of these stories and these remarkable people. We just need to shine a light on them and bring their stories out, because we have such big platforms. And you too, Guy, on Twitter, you have some 1.2 million followers. You actually joined Twitter in 2007, one year after Twitter was launched. What made you so bullish about Twitter? Why did you join in the first place, and how do you see Twitter nowadays?
Okay, to tell you the truth, when I first saw Twitter, the first thing that I did is I went to Twitter's homepage, right, which was twitter.com. And I looked, and there were tweets like, Lonely Boy 15, the line at Starbucks is long. And Tiffany from LA, I am so tired right now. And I looked at that, and I said, why the hell do I care if the line at Starbucks is long, or Tiffany is tired, or Brooke is, I don't know, surfing? I mean, who are these people? What do I care? And so that was my first reaction to Twitter. I joined it because of South by Southwest, where at South by Southwest, many people were just harping upon how great it was and how it was useful to find the best parties and the best sessions at South by Southwest. And I think the light went on for me when I used Twitter and I started searching for competitors to the products that I was involved with. And then I started searching for my own name, and, to my utter amazement, people were discussing me, so I had to get involved with that. And so that's when I saw, I could see why social media and Twitter in particular was useful. Having said that, now it's 2020, and I still do tweet, but I can't tell you that Twitter is at the top of my consciousness, because I think that I may have 1.2 or 1.5 or whatever it is million followers, but I don't know how many of them are active, alive, or not Russian bots anymore. I think Twitter has so much noise that you kind of just put stuff out there and you pray. And I think that, much of social media is so abusive that my approach to social media, which drives a lot of people crazy, is that I've taken the social out of social media for me. So, most people's approach to social media is to make social interactions. And that's not my goal at all. For me, social media is a means to an end. And the end is to promote my podcast. It's to promote Canva. It's also to promote the preservation of democracy in America. And so I have very specific ends in mind when I use the means: Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and LinkedIn. But many people can't relate to that because they're trying to be social. I'm not trying to be social. I'm anti-social social media.
And you really do not care too much about numbers, whether it's money or social media followers. So what do you care about the most apart from
Wait,
your family? What is your goal in life?
who told you I didn't care about money? But
Everything Guy touches only gold.
no. So I guess, at the end of my life, I would like people to say that I empowered people. That I empowered people with my writing, my speaking, my advising, my investing, my employment, and my podcast. That they listened to this story of this woman who was stuck across the border. They listened to Margaret Atwood or Jane Goodall or Christy Yamaguchi, and they got inspired. They learned something. They became a little bit more remarkable because of my podcast, writing, speaking, advising, investing.
On technology in general, Silicon Valley has, for the past, by and large, 2-3 decades now, been the golden standard of global technology. And now China is obviously quickly catching up.
Yes.
The future global tech landscape.
Listen, I am not a futurist nor a visionary. I don't know. I think that right now, the United States is doing things that if you sat down, if you were China or Canada or Australia, if you were the leader of one of those countries and you sat down and you said, what could America do to help us? You could not build a better case for what we're doing to help you. Because I think that what made America great was immigration, that we had a great educational system that brought the best and the brightest to our country. Some of them stayed, some of them returned. But if you look at the great tech companies, they weren't started by people whose great-great-great-grandfather or grandmother came across the Atlantic on the Mayflower. The great tech companies are started by second and third generation immigrants. And these people were poor. I mean, that's why they left their country, right? I mean, if you're in the great, top echelon of a society, you don't uproot yourself and go to another country, right? And so these were people who, weren't quote unquote the desirable immigrants. And my family was like that. So my grandfathers came over to Hawaii, not because they had PhDs from Keio University in Japan. They came over to Hawaii to pick sugarcane, And so, today, would my grandfathers be able to immigrate to the United States? Not clear. So that's why I think we're kind of handing the future to other countries.
When you say we are handing the future to other countries, you are specifically naming the United States handing the future to the emerging markets, particularly China. Is that the case?
Well, China or Canada. I mean, if I were Pierre Trudeau, I would just be doing backflips about, oh my God, thank you, United States, for doing this. Thank you to making it inhospitable to immigrants. Thank you for making people want to move to Canada where we need more people. Thank you for making people enroll at McGill University. And now they're going to stay in McGill University. They're going to stay in Toronto. They're going to stay in Vancouver. And they're going to start companies because we speak English, we also speak French, but we speak English, right? And we have laws based on English law, so people understand our laws, and we're in the same time zone as America. So, hallelujah, man. Thank you, America. Make Canada great again.
Do you think in this whole global landscape of technology, Guy, but for the United States, arguably for the past decade or so, we have gotten stuck in that age while seeing China quickly catching up. Is there any sort of global breakthrough technologies that has the potential to fire up another round of industrial revolution that are on the cusp in Silicon Valley or anywhere else in the United States?
Oh, man, that's a very, very tall test to foster another revolution. You could look at it like there was a computer revolution, there was an internet revolution, depending on how you feel, you could say social media is another revolution. So what would pass that test? Maybe artificial intelligence, but we've been talking about artificial intelligence for about 50 years. Maybe it's various forms of green technology so that we can have our cake and eat it too. But I think that it's to be determined. And I freely admit I am not a visionary. My job is to see something that's great, not invent it.
Do you think that the handover between the United States and China, this turning point in history, has already happened this year with COVID-19, that, the US has basically lost the game and China is now the new superpower, or is there still a little bit of way to go?
I don't know how you define handing it over. It's not like we're all back to farming in the United States. I don't know how you answer that question. And I also, but maybe a better answer to that question is, I don't necessarily see it as a zero-sum game. That if the United States fails, China succeeds, or if China fails, the United States succeeds. I hope it's more of a rising tide floats all boats. And one of the ways to make your boat better is that there are other boats in the race, and so it becomes competitive. I can't tell you that, okay, we've lost it, and I don't even know how do you define lost. I think that when we look back, we may say that, wow, it sure happened a lot faster than we thought. Or we may say, exactly what you said. But I cannot build a case that restricting immigration and, closing our borders and, one of the interesting ramifications of our lack of the ability to control the pandemic is that foreign students cannot come to America anymore. And that's because we blew it with the pandemic. And so the brains can no longer enter. So, think of all the Indian entrepreneurs. If it was like this back in the 70s, there are a lot of Indian entrepreneurs who could have never come to the United States. And guess what? Look at all the tech companies formed by Indian entrepreneurs. They wouldn't be here. So, I mean, that should be a cautionary tale for us.
Now, you also talked about the democratizing designs through Canva.
Yes.
Talked about the democratizing via technology for many other leading companies, from Apple all the way down. So, to me, technology companies are just monopolistic in nature. I mean, the day they are born, if they are successful, they are going to monopolize the world. And so to me, that is a fundamental paradox. When you have a technology company, on one hand, you say, I want to democratize, but on the other hand, you want to monopolize. How do you reconcile that?
What company do you think is a monopoly? Now, first of all,
Facebook, Alibaba.
Yeah, but just a second here. So who is being forced to use Facebook?
No one.
Exactly. And so, okay, but then another test of a monopoly, and really in historical perspective, the reason why people are against monopolies is the theory that once you have a monopoly, you raise prices because people can't get it anywhere else, right? Okay, so has Facebook raised the prices lately? Does it now charge you to use Facebook? At some level, you don't have to use Facebook. You don't have to pay attention to their advertising. You don't have to buy an Apple computer. You can buy a Dell, a Lenovo, a HP. Now Google, that's interesting. Google, most people default to using Google for a search engine other than in China. Well, but are you forced to use Google? I mean, you could use Yahoo, you could use any other thing. I mean, there's multiple search engines, and
but we have to agree right. But we have to agree that Google, Facebook, or even Apple, when this app tries to get onto the Apple Store, they do have tremendous pricing power.
Yes. So I wouldn't use the word monopoly, but the controlling nature of Apple is that, you know, if you want to be in the App Store, you have to play ball with Apple, right? And so there's a part of me that says, you know, that's not fair. Although, you know, that's not true of the Android store, right? So, and there are probably more Android devices than there are iOS devices. There's a part of me that says, yes, that's kind of unfair. But there's also a part of me that says, well, I mean, that's kind of the purpose of business, right? I mean, the goal of business is to get as much market share as possible. But, you know, for example, a very tactical example. When I'm on my iOS device and I want to buy an Amazon book, I cannot use the Kindle version I cannot use the iOS version of Kindle to buy a book. I have to use a browser to buy a book, and then I have to, you know, get it from the Kindle app on iOS. And to me, from the outside looking in, the reason why Apple did that is because they wanted to make it harder to buy a Kindle ebook than to buy an Apple book. And I think that is total BS. That, you know, if you did something right for the customer, if an iOS customer wants to buy a book in the Amazon Kindle iOS app, that person should be able to do that.
Last question on Shenzhen. The epicenter of China is the version of Silicon Valley. Shenzhen around the whole Hong Kong, Macau, Greater Bay Area. So now the central plan that was just launched a couple of weeks ago says that the plan is to come to parity to Silicon Valley about 2035, and maybe by the mid part of the century, for China to yet again become the gold standard. You work with Chinese entrepreneurs, Canva is invested and supported by the private equity funds in China. What's your assessment of Chinese entrepreneurs in Chinese version of Silicon Valley today? Do they have the capacity to match up?
Do you have any easy questions for me? I mean, you're assuming that I am much more worldly than I am, and I know a lot more and a lot more people than I do. In my experience, having traveled the world back before the pandemic, when you could travel the world, is that in my little tech bubble, where I have met entrepreneurs all over the world, I think entrepreneurs are more similar all over the world than different. And so whether it's two guys in a garage or two gals in a garage or a guy and a gal in a garage or apartment or dorm room in China or the United States or Canada or Croatia or Munich, I think they are all very similar. And I love entrepreneurs.